आपने लिया है, चुना है, जिस पर आप अपने विचार हम लोगों के साथ साझा करेंगी। मैं आदरणीय प्रोफेसर निम्बालकर मैडम से अनुरोध करती हूँ कि वे अपना इस व्याख्यान को आरंभ करें। प्रोफेसर निम्बालकर
जी। धन्यवाद पूजा जी। सर्वप्रथम मैं प्रोफेसर सिन्हा जी को प्रणाम करती हूँ और सर आपको मेरी नमस्ते। साथ ही साथ पूजा व्यास जी हैं, जयशंकर सर जी हैं, गणेश दास सर हैं, पूनम मैडम दिखाई दे रही हैं, शीला मिश्रा जी हैं, राजकुमार सर जी हैं। आप सभी को मेरा प्रणाम। विषय जो मैंने लिया है वो है पर्यावरण नीति शास्त्र। लेकिन मैं अपने आप को सिर्फ पर्यावरण नीति शास्त्र तक ही सीमित न रखते हुए मैं इसमें इंडिजिनियस या फिर जिसे हम कहते हैं कि आदिवासी, आई एम गोइंग टू लुक इनटू इट फ्रॉम दैट पर्टिकुलर पर्सपेक्टिव। मैं जो अपनी बात आप सबके समक्ष रखूंगी ये इंग्लिश और हिंदी मिक्स में रहेगा। तो प्रयत्न रहेगा कि सहज सरल इंग्लिश में आप सबके समक्ष में अपने विचार को रख सकूं। प्रशांत जी भी जुड़ गए हैं। प्रशांत जी आपको भी नमस्ते, आपका स्वागत है। तो अब जो विषय है जहाँ पर कि मैं ले रही हूँ वो है एनवायरमेंटल एथिक्स एंड इट विल बी विद स्पेशल रेफरेंस टू इश्यूज एंड चैलेंजेस एज फार एज द ट्राइबल एनवायरमेंटल एथिक्स इज कंसर्न्ड। सर्वप्रथम तो हम ये बात को समझने की कोशिश करेंगे क्योंकि यहाँ पर बहुत सारे विद्यार्थी भी हैं कि पर्यावरण नीति शास्त्र का है, तो इसको हम ना सिर्फ थियोरेटिकल, अपनी 1948 की किताब में उन्होंने इसका जिक्र किया था, लेकिन 1948 के बाद हम देखते हैं कि करीबन 2 दशक बीत जाते हैं और कई बार ये जो शब्द है एनवायरमेंटल एथिक्स फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम आप ये कह सकते हैं कि अर्थ डे 22 अप्रैल 1970 में जो ऑब्जर्व किया गया था, तब इसके बारे में ज्यादा गौर से इसके ऊपर विचार किया गया था। बहुत सारी बातें हैं, बहुत सारी बातों को छोड़ते हुए मैं जतन करना है सो दैट हमारा सर्वाइवल जो है वो उसकी वजह से हो सके। सो इट इज टू कीप द एनवायरनमेंट हॉस्पिटेबल फॉर ह्यूमन सर्वाइवल एंड वेलबींग अलोन। तो ये जो एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिसिज्म वैल्यू सिस्टम है उनका किस तरह से वैल्यू है जहां तक कि मनुष्य के बारे में हम विचार करते हैं। तो while we look at this view we find that there is a clear advocacy that sustainable development has to take all ethical codes and norms. Now, this is a basic belief which we find is embedded in many Western religions and philosophies. Anthropocentrism regards human as separate from and superior to nature and holds that human life has intrinsic value while other animals or while other entities, like when we talk about animals or we talk about plants or mineral resources and so on, they are the resources. तो ह्यूमन वैल्यू जो है, ह्यूमन लाइफ जो है वो सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है और बाकी सारे जो रिसोर्सेज हैं या बाकी जो सारी एंटिटीज हैं उनको हम रिसोर्सेज के तौर पर ही मानते हैं एज फार एज दी एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिक व्यू पॉइंट इज कंसर्न्ड। अब जब हम नॉन एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिज्म के बारे में बात करें तो इसमें हम देखते हैं कि दो विचार हैं। तो नॉन एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिज्म कंसीडर्स द वर्ल्ड not in terms of its utility but as that which possesses an intrinsic worth. It holds the view that human beings are not superior. तो यहाँ पे ये जो विचार है ये बहुत ही आकर्षित करने वाले विचार हैं कि जहाँ पर कि ये माना जाता है कि ह्यूमन बींग्स आर नॉट सुपीरियर एंड मेंबर्स ऑफ ऑल स्पीशीज आर इक्वल। दिस अप्रोच कॉन्स्टिट्यूट्स, नेचुरली हम देखते हैं कि इट कॉन्स्टिट्यूट्स अ रेडिकल चेंज of human attitude towards nature so that nature can be treated only as a mere storehouse of materials, but इसको हम एक इंटीग्रल पार्ट ऑफ द एंटायर एनवायरमेंटल कम्युनिटी के तौर पर भी देख सकते हैं। यहाँ पर हम बहुत सारे थिंकर्स के बारे में भी लिया था, तो वो आर्टिकल्स के बारे में हम चर्चा कर सकते हैं, लेकिन अभी क्योंकि मेरा विषय कुछ और है इसलिए ब्रीफली ही मैं इन सारे बिंदुओं को छूते हुए आगे निकलूंगी। अभी ग्राउंड फॉर असाइनिंग moral standing is life itself and thus extends the boundary of moral standing about as far as it can go। या फिर संक्षिप्त में हम ये कह सकते हैं कि जितने भी प्रजाति हैं सिंपली बाय वर्च्यू ऑफ बीइंग अलाइव, क्योंकि वो जीवित हैं तो उन सबका मॉरल स्टैंडिंग है एंड ऑल ऑफ देम डिजर्व मॉरल कंसिडरेशन। इस बात को आगे लेते हुए हम देखते हैं कि बहुत सारे लोगों ने बहुत सारे विचार प्रकट किए हैं कि जहाँ पर कि वो ये पूछते हैं कि डू ट्रीज हैव राइट टू लाइफ और नॉट, डू ट्रीज हैव मॉरल स्टैंडिंग और नॉट, or when we speak about water, so what is the, do water as a resource, should we treat it or does it have a sacredness to it or not, या फिर एनिमल्स के बारे में पीटर सिंगर का तो यहाँ पर नाम हम सभी जानते ही हैं कि हाउ ही स्पीक्स अबाउट एनिमल राइट्स। तो ये जो बायोसेंट्रिसिज्म है, इट टॉक्स अबाउट ऑल लिविंग बीइंग्स दैट सिंपली बाय वर्च्यू ऑफ बीइंग अलाइव हैव मॉरल स्टैंडिंग एंड डिजर्व मॉरल कंसिडरेशन। एंथ्रोपो नॉन एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिसिज्म में एक और विचार है, और वो विचार है इकोसेंट्रिसिज्म का। तो ये जो विचार है, inherent right to live, but all animal forms, all life forms have an inherent right to live, and the environment centricism is in stark contrast to anthropocentrism, wherein it says that it is not a derived responsibility but a primary responsibility. It holds that the integrity of the ecological collection, अब ये ecological collection क्या क्या आ जाता है इसके अंदर, तो हम यहाँ पर ecosystems के बारे में बात करें, या फिर हम habitat की बात करें, या फिर हम species की बात करें, या population की बात करें, तो यहाँ इनका ये मानना है कि the integrity of the ecological collection is more important than the survival and well-being of a particular species or elements of the ecosystem. तो ये मानते हैं कि इट्स नॉट ओनली द ह्यूमन सर्वाइवल विच इज इम्पोर्टेंट, बट इट इज एसेंशियल दैट द सर्वाइवल ऑफ ऑल द स्पीशीज इज इम्पोर्टेंट। अब ये जब सारी बातों को एक, ये जो बेसिक डिफरेंस है कि जब हम एनवायरमेंटल एथिक्स के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, कि जहाँ पर एक संक्षिप्त में मैंने आप सबके सामने रखा है कि व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिसिज्म एंड नॉन एंथ्रोपोसेंट्रिसिज्म। Now, these are the developments which have started to take place in the past 100 years or less than 100 years. दिसंबर 2015 में एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण मीटिंग हुई थी, और ये जो मीटिंग हुई थी ये डिस्कस करने के लिए हुई थी कि टू अंडरस्टैंड द डिवास्टेटिंग इम्पैक्ट ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज। तो अब हम थोड़ा सा और आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, तो हम सिर्फ एनवायरनमेंट के बारे में बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम उससे आगे जाकर बढ़ रहे हैं और हम क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में बात केम अपॉन अ कंक्लूजन, अ कंसेंसस, कि बहुत ही आवश्यक है कि जितनी भी ग्रीन हाउस गैस एमिशंस हैं उसको किसी तरह से कम किया जाए, और उसको कम करने का कारण ये है कि जो नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट क्लाइमेट चेंज पर हो रहा है उसको हमें वी हैव टू कंट्रोल इट। And यहाँ पर ultimately because of the Paris COP21, the world decided that now the time has come to address climate change. तो ये जो पेरिस COP21 में जो कमिटमेंट्स दुनिया के बहुत सारे देशों ने दिए थे, only about the governments of the world, यहाँ पर जो पॉलिसी मेकर्स हैं, for them it is becoming very essential that whatever ethical paradigms they have thought about, they will have to reconsider the ethical paradigms in order to tackle modern environmental challenges such as the climate change. तो ये जो modern environmental challenges है, तो we have to look into the ethical framework of it. और ये जब ethical framework के बारे में हम बात कर रहे हैं, तो सिर्फ हम ethics की बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, हमें यहाँ पर policy के बारे में भी सोचना है। And increasingly हम ये देख रहे हैं कि जो moral dimension of climate change है outside the own setup जो कि हमारे पास है, what is essential is that to shift, and this paradigm shift have to take place from anthropocentric, which I know is very difficult, which we know as students of environmental ethics and even of policies that we study, or the price of development though we are paying, we know that it is difficult, but it calls for a shift from anthropocentric to non-anthropocentric view. और ये जब हम व्यू को शिफ्ट करने की बात कर रहे हैं, तो यहाँ पर मेरा मेन विषय आ जाता है, और वो ये है कि किस तरह से इंडिजिनियस पॉपुलेशन जो है, they can present to us an interesting case studies. We are all aware that just as we are facing the work of tribals change, and why they have to do it, because of the physical locations and other distinctive features. Before I go about their role, संक्षिप्त में कि ये indigenous population या indigenous people कौन है. So the concept of indigenous people, It emerged from the colonial experience, whereby we find that the aboriginal people of a given land were marginalized. चाहे वो ऑस्ट्रेलिया के हों, चाहे वो गुटामेरा को हो, चाहे वो इंडिया के हों, चाहे वो कोई और देश के हों, हम देख रहे हैं कि वहाँ की जो इंडिजिनियस पॉपुलेशन है उनको मार्जिनलाइज किया गया है. इनफैक्ट कुछ देशों में तो यहाँ तक की स्थिति थी कि जो इंडिजिनियस पॉपुलेशन है, एक पर्टिकुलर देश है गुआटामेला, जहाँ पर की पीपल चिल्ड्रन टिल द एज ऑफ 12 दे वर सेव्ड, लेकिन people and children from the age of 12 onwards of a particular tribe, they were all slaughtered, they were all killed. तो इस तरह से या तो उनको उस तरह से मार्जिनलाइज कर दिया गया था, या फिर हम देखते हैं कि उनको मेन स्ट्रीम में आने से रोक दिया गया था. So we find that this indigenous people, they have emerged from the colonial experience, whereby the aboriginal people of a given land were marginalized after being invaded by colonial power. Now, whose people are now dominant over the earlier occupants. Australia is a very good example of it. India too is an example of it, though hum indigenous population, and we find that the colonials have been ousted from India, yet we find that the marginalization still takes place. So this definition की है कौन? एक तो definition ये थी, और दूसरा ये कि ये basically है कौन? So they are the people and nations, are like indigenous communities. They are those कि जहां पर हम देखते हैं कि एक तरीके की हिस्टोरिकल कंटिन्यूटी दिखाई देती है. और ये जो हिस्टोरिकल कंटिन्यूटी है, यू विल फाइंड दैट इट इज सैंडविच समवेयर बिटवीन प्री इन्वेजन एंड प्री colonial societies that developed on their own territories. They consider themselves to be distinct from other sectors of the societies, and we find that society, and they are determined to preserve, develop, and transmit, who are talking who are going back to the roots. I have been following various of historical continuity, and also to have an understanding of the ethical framework in which they function. Now the question arises is, why is it that the ecological wisdom of the indigenous population matter to us? We consider ourselves to be highly developed. We consider ourselves to have all the wisdom. So does it really matter to us कि ये जो indigenous population है, जनजाति है, तो इनके पास की जो wisdom है, does it really matter to us? So we find that many of the environmental philosophers, they have pointed out that our attitude, our का मतलब क्या, आपका मेरा, our attitude towards the nature is not appropriate. Naturally so, because हम human centric environmental ethics के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं. तो इसलिए इन लोगों का ये जो philosophers हैं, they are suggesting that it is essential for us to have a look at the northwest की बात करें, तो वहां पर हम देखते हैं कि क्लाइमेट चेंज की वजह से जो फ्रेश वाटर है, बहता हुआ पानी है, ओशनिक एनवायरनमेंट है, it has severely impacted it. And why, and what has happened because of it? Salmon is a kind of a sea creature which is important and essential for the tribals over there. And we find that the survival of salmon has been affected, and this in turn is having an impact and is having a change, or is impacting the subset of climate change, have resulted in many Alaska natives facing a loss of lifestyle, culture, and even traditional ecological knowledge. Will have a catastrophic and devastating impact on indigenous people. And these are the humanities of their traditional care of the indigenous population. One particular writer, thinker, I would like to quote over here, and none other than environmental philosopher J. Baird कहते हैं. तो उनका जो ये प्रकृति के साथ संबंध environmental to 60 million indigenous population, that many of the philosophers think nature, of the about nature. So the first nature can be identified in some Asian tradition. He who created human beings in his own image and fellow members in nature. So this respectful relation you have to maintain with the frogs, with the elephants, with the birds, with the vultures, with every rest. As far as the anthropocentric perspective is somewhere around 68, is nearly 573. But Also, one more thing which we need to notice is that they constitute 55.16% of the total displaced population, and how it contributes. It presents an important role, a significant role in tribal communities. और ये जो डायकोटोमी है वो इस तरह से है कि एक जगह पर उनके पास ट्रेडिशनल वैल्यूज है, ट्रेडिशनल लाइफस्टाइल है, और दूसरा ये है कि दे आर ethics is concerned. The paucity of time doesn't permit me to go into the different layers, but environmental ethics in general. तो इसकी तरफ भी हमें ध्यान देना है कि ये जब हम environmental policy के बारे में बात करते हैं, so we find that the environmental policy is the product of the combined influences of environmental ethics, science, environmental policies are concerned. But I feel that the governments really have to work hard to see that we make a shift from the anthropocentric environment. And folk which are there, they are a unique way of passing down wisdom of the ancient generations. And then again, we have the stories, we have various songs and folk songs also, which talks this. We need to study in depth also कि ये tribalization क्या है और ये sanskritization क्या है. So K.K. Singh had described about this tribalization of religion, जहाँ पर कि वो refer करते हैं कि how the influences of tribal cultures has taken place on other religions. Similarly, जब हम संस्कृताइजेशन की बात करते हैं तो ये है कि किस तरह से, but we find that there is hardly a contract of it. सवाल ये हो सकता है कि why can't the tribes do it? और यहाँ पर और भी बहुत सारे biases हैं. Now, in order, it is very essential that we delineate as far as data analysis are there. However, because they lack formal education to study themselves, as such, of the tribes as an integral part of the research viewpoint, to see that how we, at the same time, like since there are so many issues which I want, we feel that since they are uneducated, since they are not let note that it's not only that we have to in the number, those many bhakris would be prepared, meaning that there should not be wastage of food. Mere wastage is one of the most important reason for climate change is the food wastage, which I plan to express my views in front of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
धन्यवाद मैडम जी, धन्यवाद
पूजा जी,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Navita ji, for your detailed exposition on the subject, and very well you defined, particularly specified with the tribal people, of their concern related to environmental ethics. Thank you so much. And now, before taking some questions regarding
Director CPR Lucknow Center, Dr. Pooja Basji, Senior Consultant ICPR Lucknow Center, Dr. Joy Sangha Nimbalkar ji, or philosophy is and what philosophy does and what philosophy could do in this case. Philosophy is thinking about thinking. First, there is thinking at the factual level, and then there is thinking at the conceptual level. Philosophical thinking is a holistic thinking, and it is with an ethical facet are related in a sense. Philosophia Bio-Kubernetes is the period of an existential crisis for the human beings. Existential crisis occurs, we start questioning by extreme negative emotions, which often cause people to question their place in life, their worth, or their purpose. Existential crisis is not, however, the same as depression, despite the similar symptoms that human beings built during the past several thousand of years. Medical sciences are undauntedly busy in polluting the environment and exploring more technology to cure the ills of existing technology. The rulers and leaders have turned berserk, now telling something and the next moment telling it's contrary or contradictory. Is deeply hot, have become packs of information made available, it is difficult to cope with such change that has become the only option in the corona crisis. Our Prime Minister, Srijukta Narendra Modi, in his Mann Ki Baat program, 2 days पटने में अहम भूमिका in the time of crisis, culture has to handle a big task. It plays the role of confronting the crisis. Culture acts like an critical reflection on the pandemic is pushing to the limit. At a time when the radicality and speed of the world's major upheavals have may disorient us, philosophy allows us to both step back and see further ahead. To which we call nature's fury. The National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, is the talk of the day. Let us have an inkling of what it is about and its fallout. Manufactured objects depend on how those atoms are arranged. If we rearrange the atoms in coal, we can have diamond. If we rearrange the atoms in sand and add some other elements, we can have computer chips. If we rearrange the atoms in dirt, water, and air, we can have potatoes. Thus, we can have almost anything out of anything else. For capitalist industry, enormous inequalities to freeze these conditions in place, leaving the urban populations stranded without work and without a dynamic economy offering hope of upward mobility. It is interesting to note that in the 1920s and 1930s, Sir M. Visvesvaraya raised the slogan, industrialize or perish. Mahatma Gandhi countered M. Visvesvaraya by proclaiming industrialize and perish. Fields, cotton, he was in favor of those industries only that help producing, preserving, and providing agricultural goods. Dr. Nimbalkar was referring to the style of minimalism. In the West, they now talk about minimalism, need not for our assumes new connotation, new dimension, and wide currency. Anything contrary to and anything except development, political proceedings. So, technological diversity. The beginning of parasitism has been discussed in detail, but I will not go into that. This parasitism is one-sided contrast. One-sided. A common sense understanding is that nature is all that grows in the nature in which the two are intertwined. It is not always easy to identify the origin of what one sees, nature or culture. A nature. He contends that this is very much true of man, which of all species is capable of the wide variety of experience. Delineates us from being inclined to think of civilization, houses, trees, cars, etc., as separating man from origin. Our civilized environment, then, as though it were the outlook of the technotonic man, appears to be based on the presupposition that nature finds fulfillment through the eyes of man. This is known as ecological eschatology. Such a man, he must revise his conception that his comfort and luxury, the earth is the cultural soil in which their ancestors live and rest. Great White Chief in Washington, the President of USA, when in 1855, this is very much worth quoting, although the great chief in Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land. This is a letter air and sparkle of the water. How can you buy them? Great chief in Washington sends word that uh, so but we will consider your offer to buy our land. It will not be are our brothers. They quench our thirst. The rivers carry our canoes and feed our land. You must give the rivers the kindness you give any brother. But if we sell you our land, whatever posted to
about thinking, he subsequently went into the detail. The other question which I always find,
the philosopher's work begins at that level. Philosophy is there with the sciences at the beginning in this way, and in the middle, in so far as it uses certain concepts, philosophy goes on to give rise to such viruses, etc. So philosopher's task is this. When we deal with practical ethics and philosophy, what do? We do not sit upon judgment on particular cases and what to do, what to do, what not to do. We rather discuss those principles which empowers the decision maker to say what to do in particular cases. Particular cases are important for particular cases, but in
environmental perspective. The reason to it is the surface of the earth. It becomes essential for environmental ethicists to raise their voice. One of the, for that matter, marriage as an institution, how they work over there, and how in the so-called developed societies.
one, what I was saying was that anthropocentrism in and by itself does not necessarily to say that it is in your own good and for your own survivors. Now, are we going to say that since these an infantile and you know it?
Yeah.
So I was just trying to call that now we need to sophisticate our discussion, and we cannot just go back. Only needs to be far more sophisticated. And the major crisis is primarily that, even when you go to Delhi and you see that there are poor farmers.
Need, but not for it. My act may seem to be the best act, rights, equal moral standing, about a fine balance. We have to take care of money. That was the wrong. I know it is in some kind of a working on this concept, and to look at knowledge can be enhanced by your inputs.
For a very informative and very elaborate is who the author is referring to. As you say that we should and the feminist ethics, there it might be about women who are accepting sati. Should I take any role in curbing the image?
Right now is that we are trying to demarcate ourselves into strict disciplines of philosophy, of an activist, and of a social thinker or a social scientist. It is my job. Speaking only a state concern is. It's like even when we look at it, for example, if you look at how man and nature, they have to be more we have a responsibility to take care of the
should we I think hello? Very small comment, anthropocentric view of environment, but help just talking about some sort of and how can it be addressed, because ethics, but it is a part of
आ रही है आपका ये जो प्रश्न है, इस प्रश्न को पॉलिसी मेकर्स लेंगे, और जब ये पॉलिसी हमारे विचार प्रणाली में और हमारी जो पॉलिसी प्रश्न को समझ नहीं पाई थी, अब जब चैट बॉक्स में देखा है तो मैं समझने के लिए क्वालिफाइड नहीं है, बट देन देयर आर
सर का उद्बोधन हमारे लिए बहुत प्रोफेसर आरती सिन्हा
को नमस्कार। प्रोफेसर स्कीम है कि जिसमें वस्तुतः कोई जो प्रेजेंट करता है वही अध्यक्षता भी करता है, और यंग स्कॉलर को हम लोग सबसे पहले एक्चुअली स्टडी सर्किल नए जनरेशन के लिए स्टडी सर्किल एक बहुत ही सशक्त माध्यम है, क्योंकि बहुत सारे ऐसे हमारे यंग स्कॉलर्स हैं जिनको कि बहुत बड़ा प्लेटफॉर्म नहीं मिल पाता किसी कारणवश, लेकिन स्टडी सर्किल ये अभी एक इंटरनेशनल लेवल पर ये वर्क कर रहा है, लेकिन हम लोग का स्टडी सर्किल है लोकलाइज्ड। पूरे हिंदुस्तान भर के यूनिवर्सिटीज में ये टू प्रमोट द फिलॉसफी एंड द यंग टीचर्स, इसके लिए मेरा आग्रह भी होगा कि जहाँ भी, जैसे उड़ीसा, I have invited Professor G.P. Das to just start this study circle with a small circle. Minimum it can be even 5, and maximum it can be whatever number you desire. Now I come to congratulate Professor Namita Nimbalkar for presenting very in a robust way. As Rakesh Chandra says that she is a very robust in presentation, and Professor Das is certainly very grave and serious. Though he is very senior, he is also a robust one. So I must congratulate both, and especially when Rakesh Chandra, Prashant Shukla, Lucknow people are very active, and actually they are they nourish this study circle. I don't have other words. They simply nourish. Though we started in Patna, earlier also I told, and since Poonam Singh is always connected, so I would like to request openly that she should come forward. When I stayed in Patna regularly, the philosophy circle was very much regular. But naturally, I have got other responsibility. So I feel that somebody else should, in Patna and Odisha, Utkal, these two centers should be started. That now I come to the subject. So naturally, in environmental ethics, philosopher's perspective is very important. And second, we are talking about the policy makers. So I will rather say that in the corridor of policy makers, philosopher must be there. Because if the policy does not work for human welfare, does not work for the well-being of the society, on what is right and what is wrong, so naturally, technically, philosophers should be in the corridor of the decision making. That is my humble suggestion. And whoever may be, I do not know, there may be some administrator also, and everybody is acquainted with some administrators. So naturally, we in America, we find that philosophers are in very many committees, and especially in hospitals. Ethic committees there. So in India also, that committee in which philosophers are present. So ethic committee, that committee in which policies are being framed, but but philosophers are very much actively participating. That I am not sure. Even in India, in the hospital, we have got some certain committees, but teachers of philosophy are not very much associated. So we wish that we can impress on others, other members of society, to that philosophy should be incorporated in the policy maker policy committees. So this is and anthropocentric environmental ethics. So there are three perspectives. Philosophers, I have asked that the role that we are discussing, we can. One is the anthropocentric. So man is the center. The one is the anthropocentric view, and another view can be has presented in a very philosophical way. So I can say that one is the anthropocentric perspective, the other is the ecocentric perspective, and ecology includes living and non-living, both. So naturally, ecocentric perspective, and the third will be the Indian perspective. Or I can say, naturally, in India, Vedanta is very, very dominant. Professor Jatasankarji is not here. The third perspective regarding environmental problems can be very safely understood as Vedantic perspective, which there is a difference between human anthropocentric perspective and ecocentric perspective. And when I talk about the Vedantic perspective, that is the Indian perspective. And naturally, Vedanta considers living and non-living, even plants, they have got soul. They are also so equal. They have also got right. Human beings, they have got right. But plants also, they have got right. So naturally, man is important. And values are certainly related to man, and we may talk about land ethics. I remember one book, Land Ethics by Aldo. So land is very yes. So Aldo, he talks about, he has written the book, The Land Ethics. Long back, I happened to see that book. I could not go thoroughly, but I saw that book long back. So naturally, why I talk about anthropocentric teleological ecoethics, why that I have brought the teleology, because ethics cannot be very much fruitful if it does not serve some purpose. We cannot think that Rakesh Chandra also talked about that we cannot think about non-teleological ethics. Ethics must have some purpose, otherwise it will. So man is a center. Professor G.P. Das and Professor Namita Nimbalkar. And if I say that animals have got also rights, they have got right to live. We cannot kill them brutally. So that will be even the land. So ecoethics, though I may not be very much convinced that there are grades. Animals are being the animals are being used for human well-being. For man eats animal in order to survive. So then, Alok Tandonji said that whenever there is a study circuit, the question, what is philosophy, is being discussed. Philosophers, they discuss about philosophy, but they discuss a lot of things. So naturally, we come to the Indian perspective. Indian perspective of ecoethics will be certainly a Vedantic perspective. That will be a very convenient one. So with these words, I express my gratitude and thanks, and I request that Professor G.P. Das should organize a study circle meetings in Utkal, and then my purpose will be served. So thank you very much.
Sir, one
I
information.
do not know in return the grant.
Sir.
So
I will give my recommendation to you.
You can give a report. Ravenshaw University should give the report.
और साथी लोगों का एक धन्यवाद आप डॉक्टर जयशंकर सिंह।
जी जयशंकर जी कहाँ?
अभी तो जुड़े थे सर डॉक्टर जयशंकर सिंह। जयशंकर जी
आप ही दे